Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, historic flooding in Washington state after days of heavy rain. Tens of thousands of residents have had to leave their homes, and officials say more evacuations could follow. Christina Corona has the details. The U.S. seizure of a sanctioned oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela has sent alarms to China, Russia, and Iran. Their shadow fleet of tankers is now in the crosshairs of the U.S. Justice Department. Luis Martinez has the latest. The European Union today indefinitely froze Russia's assets in Europe to ensure that Moscow-friendly governments can't prevent the billions of euros from being used to support Ukraine. That's as the U.S. continues working on Ukraine peace proposals. Arian Pazdar reports. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy demands that New York adhere to federal regulations on commercial driver's licenses. He threatens to pull over $70 million in federal highway funding if the state fails to comply. Jason Blair reports. And two more Pennsylvania police officers testified today at the marathon evidentiary hearing in the Luigi Mangione case. Arlene Richards has their takes on what happened at the McDonald's and at the police station during Mangione's arrest.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening and thank you for joining us tonight. Washington state is facing dangerous flooding, with the National Guard now stepping in to help residents evacuate. Officials are providing updates as rivers reach record levels and more areas face potential flooding. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more.
After days of heavy rain, Western Washington is grappling with historic flooding, forcing tens of thousands from their homes and threatening even more as rivers reach record levels. Governor Bob Ferguson says the Skagit River is expected to crest Friday, making the next 24 hours critical for communities in its path. President Donald Trump has approved Washington's request for an emergency declaration.
The call I received from Secretary Noem earlier today, I deeply appreciated her phone call, obviously. Deeply appreciated the granting of the emergency declaration that the state of Washington has requested to help address the real crisis that we're facing.
Ferguson warned that tens of thousands more residents could face evacuation orders as flooding pushes into more populated areas.
The situation is truly historic. Rivers like the Skagit River and Cedar Rivers literally experiencing historic levels of flooding. And so this is something that the people of the state of Washington have not faced before, this level of flooding.
Roughly 5 million people across Western Washington remain under flood watches.
We've rescued 20 to 30 people in various situations. Some of them are mobility impaired. They've gotten stuck in their homes. Some were not expecting the water to rise as quickly as it did. People then have gotten trapped in their homes and they've gotten no way out. All the roads around their home have gotten blocked.
Water levels began slowly dropping Friday, but forecasters say major catastrophic impacts could continue for days across Western Washington and parts of northwestern Oregon. Officials are urging people to stay out of the water.
So there's debris under the water, there's power lines under the water, there's bacteria, there's a lot of boil water notices out right now. So we just don't want people getting in that water. We don't want people getting involved in it.
The National Weather Service says the Skagit River reached over 37 feet overnight, well above the 28-foot flood stage, causing severe, potentially record flooding from Sedro-Woolley to Mount Vernon. By Friday afternoon, new evacuation orders were issued for Burlington, where the National Guard is going door-to-door to alert residents and assist with evacuations. No deaths have been reported, but officials warn that conditions remain extremely dangerous, with flood alerts in place through Saturday morning. Christina Corona, NTD News.
More states are being sued by the Justice Department over their voting records. The Justice Department has filed lawsuits against Colorado, Hawaii, Massachusetts, and Nevada. That's for failing to provide their voter registrations to the department. The DOJ said the Attorney General has the legal authority to demand statewide voter registries and ensure proper voter registration and voter list maintenance. Colorado argues the Trump administration does not have the legal right to request the information, and Massachusetts said the department did not provide meaningful justification for the request. A lawsuit was also filed against Fulton County, Georgia, over 2020 election records. So far, the Justice Department has filed 18 lawsuits against states for failing to comply with such requests. Russia, China, Iran, and Cuba condemned the U.S. seizure of a sanctioned oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez breaks down how this seizure impacts the world's authoritarian regimes.
Nicolás Maduro, the leader of the Cartel of the Suns and of the Venezuelan regime, touted his friendship with the Russian regime of Vladimir Putin after the U.S. seized a sanctioned oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela.
Valiente el presidente Vladimir Putin de Rusia.
I had a long conversation with our elder brother, brave friend, President Vladimir Putin of Russia. He told me, "I want you to know that we unwaveringly support the Venezuelan process, President Maduro, and your efforts to defend your national sovereignty and peace throughout the South American region."
The vessel had made port in Iran and China earlier this year and was carrying more than 1.9 million barrels of Venezuelan crude when it was seized, half of which belonged to a Cuban oil importer. The vessel had been sanctioned back in 2022 by the Biden DOJ for having direct links to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard's Quds forces. Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado asked the international community to continue seizing sanctioned vessels that help finance authoritarian regimes worldwide.
Maduro's regime relies on totalitarian regimes from other parts of the world to attack and harm millions of Venezuelans. Russia, Iran, Cuba, terrorist groups like Hezbollah and Hamas, drug cartels, and the Colombian guerrilla are occupying Venezuela.
U.S. lawmakers are divided over the Trump administration's actions in the South Caribbean Sea. Republican senators have asked the administration to also target vessels that are helping sell Russian oil illegally worldwide.
This escalation of potential military action against Venezuela is one of the most dangerous steps by presidents in recent history.
I think we have to keep in mind that we've had sanctions on Venezuelan oil for some time. I have no problem with this ship being seized.
Done it before. I hope we'll do it again. I hope we'll start putting on the table seizing Russian oil tankers. China's a big offender here. They buy Venezuelan oil, they buy Iranian oil, they buy Russian oil.
The Ukrainian regime struck this week a Russian tanker in the Black Sea. The so-called shadow fleets that help finance the Russian, Iranian, and Venezuelan regime are on notice. It is estimated that there are over 1,000 oil tankers in this shadow fleet that helps prop up regimes like the Venezuelan, the Russian, the Iranian, the Cuban, and the Chinese Communist Party. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
The European Union has agreed to indefinitely freeze Russia's assets held in Europe. That's at least until the fighting ends and Russia compensates Ukraine for the heavy damage. The prime ministers of Hungary and Slovakia opposed the idea. Both of them also oppose more military funding for Ukraine.
Providing tens of billions of euros for military spending is prolonging the war, not to mention the fact that the use of frozen Russian assets could directly jeopardize U.S. peace efforts.
Most EU members want to keep Ukraine financed and fighting as they see Russia's invasion as a threat to its own security. The U.S. keeps working on peace proposals to end the war in Ukraine. The proposals include multiple points, such as security guarantees, for example. Kyiv now says the most crucial point is the question of territory. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has more.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky saying the issue of territory remains a major sticking point in the peace process. On Wednesday, Ukraine presented the U.S. with a revised 20-point framework to end the war. Zelensky says the U.S. is offering to create a free economic zone in the Ukraine-controlled parts of the eastern Donbass. Russia is calling it a demilitarized zone. But Zelensky added Ukraine may not accept this proposal because it's not a fair compromise. He further stated that Ukrainians should get a vote in a referendum on any potential concessions of territory. Meanwhile, the fighting in Ukraine continues. Zelensky published this footage on Friday, saying Russia attacked the Odessa region, including its infrastructure. Zelensky says today's Russian strike, like many others before it, had no and could have no military purpose whatsoever. A civilian vessel in the port of Kramatorsk was damaged. The Ukrainian president also posted a video of himself on Friday, addressing troops fighting in Kupiansk in the Kharkiv region.
Today, it is critically important to achieve results on the battlefield so that Ukraine can achieve results in diplomacy.
Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Moves to combat the censorship of Americans by foreign regulatory powers. The proposed Wyoming Granite Act would serve as a sword and a shield to push against fines and defend against threats to free speech. It's also being considered at the federal level. NTD's international correspondent Malcolm Hudson brings us more.
American tech companies are facing the threat of either censorship or fines from foreign nations. But there are moves to combat these impositions. Elon Musk's X was recently fined $140 million by the European Union under the EU's digital rules, while Reddit is suing Australia over the country's new social media ban for children. Preston Byrne, managing director at law firm Byrne & Storm PC, says these foreign regulations are an intrusion on American First Amendment protected speech.
And they're deciding that Americans doing things which are perfectly lawful in the United States are now illegal in the European Union or the United Kingdom or Australia or various other places. So this is a coordinated effort by countries that aren't the United States to intrude on the sovereign territory of the United States and the rights of U.S. citizens.
Byrne said foreign regulatory bodies will seek to invoke sovereign immunity under U.S. law to defend themselves from lawsuits by U.S. firms, which makes it harder for the American firms to counter the fines or demands for censorship. What could change this is the proposed Granite Act. Byrne said the act would be an effective sword and shield. The shield essentially confirms the First Amendment right of U.S. citizens against foreign powers, while the sword is much more aggressive.
It penalizes any threat, attempt, any message to an American in an attempt to intimidate them from the free exercise of their constitutional rights under threat of a foreign penalty. It creates absolutely massive punitive damages.
The Granite Act is currently making headway in Wyoming. It would allow U.S. firms to hit back with lawsuits 3 times the quantity of any threatened fine, which in some cases could reach tens of billions of dollars. U.S. Undersecretary of State Sarah Rogers earlier this month told GB News a federal-level Granite Act is also being considered. Byrne said the first priority is protecting American free speech, but a consequence is it could delegitimize the foreign censorship project.
At the moment, the Europeans have said, well, Americans, we want to conscript you. We want to deputize you to be our censors. So from our perspective, protecting Americans from that puts the ball back in the UK's court, and it puts the ball back in Europe's court, and it puts the ball back in Australia's court, and says, listen, if you want to be censors, you have to be censors. We're not going to be the censors for you.
And this could prompt quite tough political questions. Do those nations want to openly censor their citizens, or will they allow for greater free speech? Malcolm Hudson, NTD News.
Kilmar Abrego Garcia is back in the news. A federal judge today ruled that immigration officials cannot detain him. The decision came just hours after his release from immigration detention. Abrego Garcia appeared today for a scheduled appointment at an ice field office. The judge says officials cannot re-detain him until the court conducts a hearing on the motion for the temporary restraining order. Abrego Garcia said he will continue to fight and stand firm against what he called the injustices the government has done to him. Garcia entered the U.S. illegally as a teenager. He currently faces federal charges of human smuggling and conspiracy to commit human smuggling in Tennessee. He has pleaded not guilty to these charges. The Department of Homeland Security says police validated that he is a member of the MS-13 gang in 2019. New York State gets 30 days to comply with commercial driver's license laws for foreigners, or the Department of Transportation will start withholding federal funds. NTD correspondent Jason Blair has more from the announcement by Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy.
An American and a family gets in a car, they shouldn't be worried that they have an unqualified foreigner operating an 80,000-pound big rig that could endanger their lives.
After a nationwide audit, the Department of Transportation says that New York is the state most out of compliance with laws on issuing commercial driver's licenses, or CDLs.
53% of New York's non-domiciled CDLs were issued unlawfully or illegally.
A non-domiciled CDL is a type of commercial license for drivers who aren't residents of the issuing state. This is also used for drivers who aren't permanent residents of the U.S.
Now, what New York does is, if an applicant comes in and they have a work authorization for 30 days, 60 days, 1 year, New York automatically issues them an 8-year commercial driver's license. that's contrary to the law.
Duffy also says, we also found that New York many times won't even verify whether they have a work authorization, they have a visa, or they're in the country legally.
So they're just giving 8-year commercial driver's licenses to people who are coming through their DMV and sending them out on American roadways. And again, they're endangering the lives of American families.
Duffy says federal law requires New York to come into compliance within 30 days. If the state does not, then $72 million will be withheld from New York as a first step. Secretary Duffy also mentions California.
In California, again, 25% of their driver's licenses were issued illegally. 17,000 were pulled, and we are grateful for that.
However, Duffy says that California still hasn't complied with laws requiring drivers to understand English.
California is the only state that has refused to enforce our laws where a commercial driver speaks English, can understand English.
In September, California Governor Gavin Newsom's press office stated that claims that California doesn't enforce English proficiency laws are, quote, totally false. Duffy says that being able to speak and understand English is important so drivers can read road signs and also communicate with law enforcement in case of a crash or another emergency situation.
Here's the concern that we have. Is that many of these operators, and many of the press has covered this, they don't speak English. They can't understand English. So it begs the question, how did they get a commercial driver's license? How did they get through the system if they don't understand the language?
Reporting from Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
Today is day 7 of the evidentiary hearing in the Luigi Mangione case. 2 more Altoona, Pennsylvania police officers took the stand, giving testimony about what happened at the McDonald's where Mangione was arrested. NTD's Arlene Richards has more.
2 more Altoona, Pennsylvania police officers took the stand Friday on day 7 of the Luigi Mangione evidentiary hearing. Mangione is accused of killing United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. His defense attorneys are working to get key evidence tossed out of the case before trial. Officer Samuel McCoy testified Friday that he knew the incident at the local McDonald's was serious when he saw his lieutenant, William Hanley, putting on his bulletproof vest before leaving the station house. Lieutenant Hanley leaving with a vest on, that means something's happening, McCoy testified. Significant. Throughout the weeks-long hearing, the defense has criticized officers for searching for a gun, implying that it wasn't necessary if they were only investigating a fake ID incident and not a homicide. McCoy said, with the information I had that he was a homicide suspect, it's very possible that he had weapons. Mangione's defense team has accused police officers of violating Mangione's constitutional rights when they moved his backpack to another table that wasn't within his reach. McCoy moved the backpack. He said he moved the backpack out of safety so that if he decides he wants to make a dramatic exit per se, he doesn't have access to any weapons. Mangione's attorneys have also argued that their client wasn't read his Miranda rights soon enough and that statements he made before they were read should be excluded at trial. McCoy had asked Mangione a series of questions that he said were meant to get information. For example, he asked, "Is this your property? And do you know what all this nonsense is about?" Sergeant Eric Houston oversaw the search of Mangione at the police station and helped catalog the items seized from him. He said there was a good bit of property and over $7,000 when he was arrested. Houston can be heard on body cam footage reading Mangione's to-do list to a New York contact. The listed items, he said, more likely than not indicated that this individual was the shooting suspect NYPD was looking for. The defense suggested those actions were improper. The hearing, which will continue into next week, was adjourned until Tuesday. A written decision from Judge Gregory Caro is expected in January. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
Coming up, President Trump honoring the legendary 1980 Miracle on Ice U.S. men's hockey team in the Oval Office. Mario Tzu at the White House. And what's the significance of the Miracle on Ice for those who had lived through the Cold War? We'll hear from folks in D.C. when we return. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. President Trump awarding congressional gold medals to the legendary Miracle on Ice men's hockey team. The 1980 U.S. Olympic team defied nearly insurmountable odds to defeat the Soviet Union, the world's largest hockey superpower, propelling them to win a gold medal and the nation's admiration. We now go live to NTD's Washington correspondent, Mari Otsu, at the North Lawn of the White House. Mari, good evening.
Tiff, good evening. That's right. Just moments ago, President Trump here in the Oval Office was hosting the members of that U.S. Olympic men's ice hockey team to sign a bill awarding them congressional gold medals just months before the 2026 Winter Olympics in Italy. Among those present were Captain Mike Eruzione, who's known for scoring that iconic game-winning goal against the Soviets in 1980, goaltender Jim Craig, and forward Buzz Schneider. The Miracle on Ice refers to the U.S. team's stunning victory over the Soviet Union at the 1980 Winter Olympics in Lake Placid. The game took place during the Cold War when U.S.-Soviet tensions were high, and the U.S. team was made up mostly of amateur and college players, whereas the Soviet team was the dominant world power in hockey, having won nearly every major international tournament for decades. The U.S. win of 4-3 in 1980 thus was widely regarded as one of the greatest upsets in sports history. Take a look.
45 years ago, this tremendous group of collegiate players and amateurs faced overwhelming odds against the Soviet Union in Lake Placid Winter Olympics. They said it was the greatest team ever put together, the Soviet team. And this was supposed to be the best team that they ever had. So it wasn't looking too sharp for our great champions behind me. As one American sports writer put it at the time, the whole world expected the Soviets to win, quote, unless the ice melts. They're religious guys, but they didn't have a lot of time to pray. They were out on the ice. But to win one of the greatest comebacks in sports history really was amazing. The United States was like brought to a level of sports that they've never seen. And they brought us Olympic glory that we celebrate to this day. Nobody thought it was possible. It really shows that, anything's possible. Nobody thought that one was possible.
Miracle on Ice is a victory that's been hailed as a symbolic triumph of freedom, teamwork, and belief over a seemingly unbeatable rival. And it's also the ultimate underdog story in sports history. A sports commentator, Al Michaels' call of the game became one of the most famous moments in sports broadcasting. Take a look.
5 seconds left in the game. Do you believe in miracles? Yes! Unbelievable.
So many moments you remember. If you're old enough, Pearl Harbor, Kennedy's assassination, Challenger blowing up in 1986, 9/11, obviously. You remember where you were. They're all terrible. They're all terrible moments. This was a beautiful moment. There was nothing political in terms of what I wasn't saying, hey, we screw those guys, we're their arch enemies. I did that solely because it was a sports miracle. We couldn't win the game, and we won the game. Well, the word in my mind was miraculous. It got morphed into a question and answer, and away we went.
Although the U.S. did end up winning that gold medal game against Finland, the Soviet victory is remembered as the defining moment of the 1980 Olympics, and thus the bid to recognize the game's anniversary with congressional medals picked up bipartisan support. Republican Representative Elise Stefanik, who was in the Oval just moments ago today, says, quote, the American defeat of the Soviet Union during the Cold War was a triumph of perseverance, unity, and spirit, not only for the athletes on the ice, but for all Americans. And Democratic Senator from Minnesota, the home state of many of the team's players, Amy Klobuchar, says the 1980 U.S. Olympic hockey team made all Americans believe in miracles. Tiff, back to you.
All right, Mari, thanks for that update. 45 years after the Miracle on Ice hockey tournament, how are Americans viewing the historic U.S. victory against the Communist Soviet Union? NTD's Sam Wong was out on the National Mall in D.C. to hear from the people.
What's the historic significance of Miracle on Ice? What was it like back then when you first get to see them win?
Well, it was very patriotic. It wasn't that far from the Cold War, so it just felt like another notch in our belt, so to speak.
Man, probably 8, 9 years old when that happened. Remember being in grade school and everyone in the class, everyone was so excited about it. Not everybody played hockey. Not everybody had ever played hockey, but I just remember everybody was watching the Olympics for that.
Just having that
where college athletes came in and played all these bigger, stronger, older guys. You know, it really sparked a thing for me when I play hockey.
I like the camaraderie. I like the connectiveness of the athletes and what it should represent to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
So.
Well, there was, I think the Soviets won about 6 times in a row, something like that.
Something like that. They had the team. They had the team.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, if you weren't on the team, you'd be doing slave labor or something like that, and So.
How does that make you feel? 45 years later, the whole team is being honored again here in D.C.
I think rightfully so. I mean, this is Cold War, you know what I mean? And just another instance of us, winning that. And I mean, not just for Americans. I mean, it's a big thing for all Western nations.
Well, that's fantastic.
That's outstanding. I did not know that.
How does that make you feel?
I think that's great. I think that's really awesome that they're having that done for them today. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well deserved.
Well deserved.
Absolutely.
Well deserved.
Yeah. About time.
And especially now that we're going into the holidays, it feels great to have something like that, and it feels so amazing.
Very patriotic, right? Patriotic. We just walked the Korean War memorial, and it's really solemn, but it gives you a deep feeling of what freedom was about. And similarly with this, it gives us that sense of pride.
Coming up in college football, fired Michigan coach Sharon Moore faces multiple charges after his arrest Wednesday. Dave Martin joins us to discuss when we return. For your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, we have some baseball news and World Cup skiing news, but let's start in college football as the case of fired Michigan head coach Sharon Moore continues to unravel. What is the latest right now?
Yeah, well, Moore was in court today. He was charged with third-degree felony home invasion, then 2 misdemeanors. That's stalking in a domestic relationship and breaking and entering. And he spent the last 2 nights in jail after being fired and subsequently arrested on Wednesday. Now, according to the complaint, the identification of the victim here is confidential, but is an individual with whom Moore has or has had a dating relationship. Now, Moore's defense attorney had no comment before appearing in court today. Now, as a coach, of course, the 39-year-old Moore went 17-8 over the past 2 seasons after taking over for Jim Harbaugh following the 2023 season where they won the national championship. Now, Michigan has named assistant coach Bill Poggi as interim head coach. The team will play Texas in the Citrus Bowl on New Year's Eve. So that's the latest today, too.
I mean, it seems like the team's doing pretty well compared to all the scandals that seem to be plaguing them.
Well, you don't really hear too much. I mean, the season ended, well, the regular season ended for them. So there's like a month now between the final regular season game where they lost to Ohio State and then the postseason, the Citrus Bowl game. Which, these bowl games, they've kind of lost a lot of their meaning, to be honest with you. They're more like, to the players, it's like an optional exhibition. Everything besides the playoffs is really not very important, unfortunately, to most of the players at this point. Growing up for me, the bowl games, that was the whole entire postseason, so it was a big deal. Not as big as any more in college football, but that's a different rant for a different day. I think I already had that rant, earlier, so I'll try not to bore everybody with that rant.
Either way, you'll be covering the bowl
I'll be watching the bowl games.
Moving to World Cup skiing news, though, all-time great Lindsey Vonn earned her first World Cup win since unretiring a year ago.
Yeah, her comeback is pretty amazing here. Lindsey Vonn is 41 years old. She made her comeback about a year ago. That was after a 5-year retirement, and she came back with a new titanium knee. Now, today's win was at a World Cup event in St. Moritz in Switzerland. It marked her record-extending 44th World Cup win now in 125 World Cup starts. Now, she won by 98 hundredths of a second, which is actually a pretty good distance in skiing there. It was touching a speeds of 74 miles an hour at one point. Now, she's targeting more wins at the upcoming Winter Games in Milano Cortina. They'll start in less than 2 months. Now, the course that'll be used for those Winter Olympics is in the Dolomites, which is a mountain range in northeastern Italy. That's where Vonn has had a lot of success. She's won 12 World Cup races there. So very exciting news for Lindsey Vonn here.
Lots to watch for there for sure. Shifting gears to baseball, though, an appeals court in the Dominican Republic this week has ordered a new trial for Tampa Bay Rays shortstop Wander Franco. Now, Franco, though, has not played since August of 2023. What could this mean for his career?
Well, he's got a chance again. The guy's still only 24 years old. Franco was previously convicted of sexually abusing a minor. That was earlier this year, sometime in June. He received a 2-year suspended sentence. Now, even with a suspended sentence, he was having trouble coming back to the U.S. with that kind of conviction on his record. But now that's been overturned, but he still faces trial, so it's still unlikely he'll be able to return unless and until this gets resolved. And then Major League Baseball would still do their own investigation before he could possibly come back. Now, he was arrested over a year ago after being accused of having a relationship with a 14-year-old. Franco was 22 at the time. Now, the mother of this 14-year-old was also found guilty of commercial sexual exploitation and money laundering. She'd been sentenced to 10 years in prison. She will get a new trial as well. Now, Franco was an all-star player for the Tampa Bay Rays at just 22 years old, already was one of the best players in the league. He signed an 11-year contract worth nearly $200 million. So he does, I would think he's that talented that he would still have some place to come back to if he ever got these charges to go away.
Quite a crazy case, though. Looking at NFL news, Steelers All-Pro defensive end TJ Watt underwent surgery yesterday to repair a partially collapsed lung. Now, this is according to a social media post by his brother. Do we have any more details on this?
Well, not surprisingly, Tiff, he is out for Monday's game with that collapsed lung. That was according to head coach Mike Tomlin. Now, according to TJ Watt's brother, JJ Watt, who posted this on social media, TJ suffered the partially collapsed lung after a dry needling treatment session at the team's practice facility on Wednesday. Now, dry needling is a therapeutic technique where thin needles are inserted into specific muscle areas to relieve pain, improve movement. There is a risk of complications, obviously, if needles are inserted, inappropriately. Now, FYI, TJ Watt's brother is of course, JJ Watt, former NFL star, 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. Now, elsewhere, though, in the NFL, the Colts have still not named a starter for Sunday's game against the Seahawks. Now, this team has signed 44-year-old Philip Rivers this week out of a 5-year retirement, just like Lindsey Vonn there, after injuries had decimated the Colts depth chart at quarterback. Head coach Shane Steichen said Rivers was throwing it well in practice, but they've yet to make a final decision. Now, I don't know about you, Tiff, but I'm pretty excited to see him actually come back here, not just because I need someone else on my fantasy football team possibly this week. It'd be kind of fun to see a guy of 5 years be able to come back and be as good as he once was 5 years ago anyway. So, he's still like 2 years younger than Brady was in his final season. So there is a hope. There is a chance.
Maybe it'll be a miracle.
Maybe another miracle, yes.
All right, Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. For on-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.